ideas in architecture, which expands to innovation, design thinking, emerging trends around the world, and sensibility. Today, we have with us architect Nakul Jain. Architect Nakul is an architectural photographer. He has been creating images for over 10 years. He is a gold medalist and alumni of School of Planning and Architecture, New Delhi. His work has been featured on several online and offline platforms such as Arc Daily, World Architecture Community, Better Interiors, and is making a mark in the field of architectural photography. He has won several awards and accolades in his young career span and continues to push the boundaries and explore new ways to photograph and document spaces. Welcome, Architect Nakul. We're delighted to have you here with us, and we're looking forward to your presentation. Let's hear it from you on narrating stories through space. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you for the introduction, Radhika. So, hi, everyone. I'll start off with my presentation because my introduction is included in the first slide, as you can see. So, my name is Nakul Jain. I'm an architect from School of Planning and Architecture, New Delhi. I graduated with 2 gold medals from this prestigious institution and then turned to my passion of filmmaking and doing photography. So today, those 2 medals are hanging, one in my drawing room, one in my office, and whoever comes, looks at that visual, calls for a story. But coming back to topic, I've been a keen observer and appreciator of art and architecture throughout my childhood, something which led me to pursue the creative field of this architecture. While others in my college and beyond that were trying to tell stories through building spaces, I resorted to capturing and presenting my narratives through media in architecture. So, stories is something which is so basic to humans that I read several different quotations regarding how important a story is. And I found one which is most apt is what I feel: after nourishment, shelter, and companionship, stories are the thing we need most in the world. I quite agree to that. But before I delve into stories more, I'd like to share what I'm exactly doing so that it makes more sense. So architectural photography is a subject that represents architecture through the medium of photography. This type of photography is used for several purposes, like documentation of spaces, advertisement of buildings, discovering of what is beyond your eye, recording of what feels in a space, or exhibiting one's experience of space. So there's a lot more to architecture when you speak about images, because images travel far and wide. So your ideas go beyond boundaries through images or filmed in today's date. So for today's discussion, and to tell those stories, I've chosen the medium of photography and not films, and due to the limitation of time as well. And why not pictures? Why not photos? Because, well, a picture is worth 1,000 words. So I thought, let's do that. Okay. What I know through every image that I see either on the internet or in a magazine or a publication is that there are surely multiple stories attached to that image. This image in front of you is a famous rock painting at Bhimbetka, one of the earliest rock paintings. And the whole act of making that painting was a certain dialogue. Who was making it is another story. Capturing it and being able to present it to people who have never been to, like I have never been to Bhimbetka, but that picture was able to create this dialogue between me and that painting. So I really believe an image is not just what you glance at it. Of course it is, most of the times it is what we just look at and we forget about it. But if you have the right patience, the dialogue becomes evident, the dialogue becomes clear, and it starts to grow on you. And that is where the real essence of your brain, your mind entering into design thinking starts off. Because I believe with every image, with every good image, your design EQ or IQ, sorry, starts to expand. And once you understand what a better image would be, you would be able to critique and differentiate between what is not a good or a better image. In that ways, your own sensibilities start to change. And this is where good images have a role play. Yeah. These are one of the earliest architectural images that influenced how we look at architecture later and how we even construct. These are by the famous Frederick Evans. And he encapsulated his whole philosophy into a very nice quote, which I'll read out. Realism in the sense of true atmosphere, a feeling of space, truth of lighting, solidity, and perfection of perspective. All of these things which you can see in this image, both viewing and especially producing accomplished architectural photographs, can be a rich and immensely satisfying experience. For years now, 10 years that I've been into architectural photography, it was always very tough to explain to anybody why architectural photography after architecture, especially parents and all those sort of discussions, even friends sometimes, that you've done architecture, then why into architecture? This is very tough. But when I came across Frederick's work, I understood that there is so much more in this field, that whole experience of being able to the pleasure of completing a story through an image is what drive me, and it still drives me. And I believe that it has a major impact on the processes of design thinking. For example, how an image inspires design thinking is one of the most important aspects to this field. Once you've been shown what you could otherwise only describe in words, you are in a much better position to empathize and generate a solution that is apt for the situation, for example. I believe an image has the capacity to greatly influence the first step of design thinking, that is empathize. So, and the following example is an even better example for this whole idea, because in the 1940s, these falling water house images moved how people were starting to look at architecture, the relationship with nature, people. So because before that, probably, well, let's say that we were pretty much living in nature when suddenly dwellings started, and there's a lot of history. I may be wrong in a few facts here and there, but people started to connect with nature at a certain point of time. They wanted to connect with nature, and images like these created that aspirational belonging in somebody's mind, that I want a place like this. It also created aspirations. Also, it focused on how a human could relate to nature, to build space like this set within nature, and how to view that space. So this sort of started a new wave in how architects were now designing their buildings. Okay. This is from the 1960s, some images and work of Julius Schulman, a very famous architectural and interior photographer. And he was actually responsible for creating a culture of luxury in the United States of America through his images. Of course, these buildings were built with a vision, but these images exemplified and in fact furthered that vision to reach a worldwide view. So these images shot in the 60s actually percolate till date with their ideologies, with inspiration for architects and designers to create a space which can probably suffice the human need of, luxury, better living, a better everything, for example. So these images, even though they were supposed to be architectural images, but introduced a certain lifestyle. And that is where Julius Schulman stood out in creating photography. So we've got a lot of modern architectural international photographers who I follow for their work, for different types of work. And I'm particularly moved by Helene Binet's work, who has shot a lot of work done by Zaha Hadid. Her images capture, I don't know, I maybe short of words in saying the femininity in the architecture. So there's always this critique and this story that happens when you look at somebody's work. But I feel she was able to present Zaha Hadid's work in a wonderful light, the way she was, the character of Helene Binet and Zaha. So both of these sort of came out in a few images, which was very interesting to see. And of course, you always have your own personal style, like Viral Patel here. He's an Australian, based in Australia, photographer who experiments with playing with hues of lights and colors, and these sort of images evoke a different set of emotions. They may not particularly tell the vision of the architect here, so he deviates from the set norm of an architectural photograph needs to document a space. He is telling his own story, which is again very subjective but interesting take. So with all these different things that people are doing with images and architecture, there is a lot of influence that happens on an architect. I believe photography has a great influence in architecture. Comparatively, little knowledge of recent architecture is gained by first-hand experience. Most of it is actually known through images. Photography is the principal means of communicating new ideas and processes, and architectural photographs continuously present new perspective on building and the built environment. The whole process of designing changes. I personally have witnessed this with architects who've been associated me for over, say, 5-6 years. Their design processes, their work has evolved immensely after we started working together. The images that they see of their own work, one is always able to critique, and one is able to think in terms of how the image can be enhanced with a simple view of the if you step in the shoes of the viewer, you can always start thinking how he will now perceive what you design. So this dialogue between the architect and the image is very different from the dialogue that the image creates with the viewer, for example, a third person or a layman. I was recently told by a client whose house was built by another architect that she was following my page on Instagram for a few years now, and she was able to gather new ideas for her dream home from the different posts that I present. So the dialogue between a client who wants a home or a place like that or a space like that is very different from the architect who's trying to evolve with their own design processes. So if we talk about the stories happening, they are multiple, and I've not even touched upon the idea that what sort of a story I am trying to tell with that image. So there are three things happening at the same time, which is very interesting. It's a very complex process. That's why I put this diagram out of how everything, an image, if suppose is placed in the center of the cross, it starts to influence design, narratives, and architects, and the viewer. So from here onwards, I will delve into some of the work that I've done over the past 10 years. Some images will be new, some very old towards the end, because they had a different way of storytelling. So even my way of capturing images has evolved, and I'm going to probably take you back to where it started. Okay. So that will be an interesting way of seeing how the images have changed over time. So these are one of the newer works. Of course, isko bhi kuch time ho gaya. It's been some while. The brief here from the architect was to be able to tell the entire story of this house in 5 images. And now that is the sort of, it's like saying that you want to write a 1-page executive summary of a PhD thesis. So of course there is so much details and work gone in every architectural project, be it small or big, but to be able to capture it in even lesser number of images is what I believe is both challenging and interesting at the same time. So very careful planning goes into creating such shots at the right time of the day, standing there waiting for the sun go down, the deep blues to come in, and assessing the fact that, okay, this is the right time to shoot this image. So there's a lot of story that obviously goes behind creating the image, but let's not touch upon that too much here. The idea was to give the architect an image which tells his way of designing. More often than not, what we are able to achieve with architectural images is present a view that the architect is also not aware of. And that is where I take pride in and aim to at every project that I shoot, is to give an image which the architect has himself never seen. So this was right next to a wall behind the reception table. So probably the view, even this view was not possible for the receptionist herself, who will be sitting on this side of the table and looking at everybody around. But this, with modern technology and a wider capture and everything, we are able to create a view which looks wonderful, also gives a complete picture of how the entrance of a modern IT office in Bangalore is. Again, use of materiality and all these things again start to tell lots of stories. The presence of green in the space conveys how the back of this space could be, probably, so it also starts to create a mystery and a question in the mind of the viewer, if you were keen enough to look at it. This is a very recent work where this is a sales office, modern sales office for a huge commercial development, and they have the architect has done a wonderful job in creating a very eye-catching sales office itself. Generally, the sales office are tin sheds with hardly much going on, but this one was supposed to be a statement in the Mohali region of Chandigarh that HLP stands out. And this whole setting, I was, while I was clicking the images, I saw in every 15 minutes or 20 minutes there was a plane that was going across. And this is real, by the way. The plane and the location, everything is absolutely real, no Photoshop or anything. And it was so interesting to see that every 20 minutes you have this constant buzzing noise over your head going, right? And it sort of sets a pace for you in the mind itself, that where you probably going to buy your next commercial investment. And the proximity to the airport was something that was so, it was being advertised by these guys, and I thought the best way to capture it is to actually show the plane flying right over. It was very nearby, and that's why we could capture it in this size. So sometimes these decisions or these little miniature stories happen on site themselves, but to be able to capture that and present it is what, again, we take pride in, and we enjoy the whole process of doing that. A single image again starts to tell different stories. In this one, the proximity. This very simple space, very beautifully done by an architect in Chandigarh, is just trying to explain how a play of colors and will sort of change or set the mood of this place. This is a corridor for a co-working space, and it was done brilliantly with half arches going across the space. And I thought best to capture just that much and show nothing else. Even if this is a corridor where people will not be sitting all the day, it's just a passage. So that fleeting moment that you cross from one space to another, you experience something very different. And that whole concept was what was tried to capture in this image. Again, interesting work done by those two architects standing in the frame. And the whole intent was to capture actually the arch and the materiality of the space, but placing the architects in the image was a decision that happened on site. And I thought, let's have somebody to show that it's a corridor and not just a glass wall and all that, and a brick wall behind it. So I realized later that this image went into the calendars that I print every year, and it was appreciated and taken very well by the audience for the simple reason that it tells more than just the arch. And that is where, again, we're talking about introducing more number of stories into an image. This is a drone image which shows a very interesting contrast of architecture and temporary architecture behind it, which is a wedding venue, in fact, and how sheds rule the marketplace today. A blue colored shed that you can see in the backdrop, and what people look for today, while somebody who has a different taste or take is trying to create as a wedding venue in the front. So the whole idea was to actually contextually tell the story of a place in Punjab which is all blingy in nature, but to sort of contrast between the two types of wedding venues that lie right next to each other. And that is the sort of story that the client wanted to put out. The story of social is well known. It's expanding like crazy, and they're making a very different sort of a mark in cafe culture, cafe bar culture. And again, this one was set inside a mall in Chandigarh. So the idea was to again differentiate while share its respective locations. And the pace of the people, I'll come to the pace of the people walking in, is also very important to share. I'll come to that in another image. I think that will be better. Monochromatic images sometimes help tell a different version of the story. My whole idea of I had a long discussion with the architect when we had shot this space. This is a hotel. This is an old hotel in Chandigarh, which has been renovated. So the table covers and everything was still kept the way it was done, say 20 years ago. And I had a feeling that these images would do much better in black and white to sort of give that feel of it being one of the oldest 5-star hotels in the city. So the architect was very open about it, though he wanted his work to be shown in color. But I pushed, and we eventually decided on a set which is colored and black and white. But I like to show this image more to emphasize the fact that Mount View Hotel, this hotel, has a history to it and not just any modern hotel. So colors also play an important role in telling the right story for the space. This is B&B in Kotkai region in Himachal. This is an old project where I was still learning. I'm still learning though, but the angles and everything was a nascent stage of my working. And the idea was here to show how the architect has readapted and reused old wood and everything to create this beautiful house, which is now run by a family, and it's a bed and breakfast in Kotkai. It's an apple orchard, and again, lots of things. These little elements that have been placed in the image create different types of stories. Sometimes we have to, while creating the image, we have to understand the setting. This is very important. This was a suggestion by the architect, and I was really happy. It was her home, and we wanted to do something with this space. The whole act of adding an image on the television, it just changed the whole narrative of the space. Otherwise, you would see like a black television, I generally try to turn on the television and put something which is contextually apt in the space. And that is where my style of photography kicks in. I like to add layers to images so that somebody who looks at it has something to ponder over, and it's not an image which you can just, scroll by. That's the whole challenge of today's short attention span audience. This image I felt was capturing the setting of the space of their house. The sort of people who were all the whole family was very interested and excited about the photo shoot happening. They all were ready and sitting just right behind me in this frame, that how is our space looking in the image. They were all excited, and they had a very happy and a very warm vibe to the whole thing. And they weren't, I've seen that empty modernism was missing in them, which I really appreciate. So this image was very apt for the whole space, and we all agreed to put Madhubala up on the screen. This again was a re-attempt at capturing the sun at the right time. In the first shoot, I missed this time because I was shooting at another space in the same house. But the architect was very keen to capture this light, which is a double height space, and he specifically designed it. So we went back to capture this at another day. And the whole idea was to actually remove most of the furniture in the room and the carpet and the rug to show the whiteness and the wideness of the space. So this was again very carefully thought and executed, and this shot almost took like an hour and a half of preparation and some variations to create the right sort of story. I often capture the same space at different lighting conditions to tell a different narrative. Something in the afternoon while something early morning changes how you look at a building and changes how you are able to derive what that building was about. Similarly, this is an international school. Again, something that the children will always see is in the day. Very hardly will some event happen that the children will actually see this at night. The whole here also, you can see the emphasis is quite a lot on the open blue skies, because the school is set in a place where you have vast fields. So an image is also able to express more than just this built form, is where it is set. And we love to play with the cropping here, for example, which shows even deep blue skies in the evening. Again, something similar, an evening shot of a residence, of a modern residence, and afternoon shot, which really changes the way the house is interacting with its surroundings. A similar shot of that same project in Kotkhay. The evening shots tell a different story, while the day shots, my personal favorites, have a very different feel to them. Okay. Sometimes using the use of reflections, sciography, and capturing a certain space like a detailed shot starts to tell a very different story about the space. Like on the image on the left is of a residence in Karnal, and it shows and it really focuses on that chair and how that seat is of importance, with the lamp coming in, with the background, which is a waterfall. So sometimes an architect attempts to create a seat of importance in the house. This was one example of that. The second image on the right is telling you the story of an entrance or a reception, but is also telling you the setting, right? Because of the reflection of the sky. So you know that what is in front and what is behind. So there's more than one thing that an image can tell, and that is where the beauty lies in. This is a wonderful building done for Noida Power Corporation Limited, NPCL, by an architect based in Chandigarh, but this is situated in Greater Noida. And I was intrigued by the fact that there was nothing around this building, but except for cows and greenery. So the architect obviously hired me to shoot the building, but this was more fun, capturing the cows grazing around. And this was really well taken by the firm. This is a very modernistic structure in Jammu in India. And the building is, I would say, it grabs your attention as you cross by it, with it's called tetrafold, and the building named by the architect's firm. And it's again in a very interesting setting. It sort of tears down the contextual setting and also establishes itself as an iconic sort of a landmark. Everybody now know this building as वो टेढ़ी मेढ़ी वाली building, fold वाली building के आसपास मेरा घर है. So people start to relate to it as a landmark now. Yeah. When I more often than not, I start to introduce humans into these images to tell even better stories. This is one of my favorite images from a clubhouse designed in Noida by an architect based in Delhi. And kids, this is a clubhouse for a housing society. So an evening shot, as you can see with the light, the children who have become free and from school and have had their afternoon naps are now running towards their activities or the swimming pool that is in the front. So you can see the excitement building up with the girl who's sort of running towards the pool. And images in such settings always convey way more number of stories than meets the eye. And of course, you can see the detailing done by the architect. These two are again one of my favorite images. And the image on the left shows a cafe's image. It's a cafe in a venue in Punjab, where the architect had done a nice detailing around the fireplace, but the evening sun was casting a beautiful windows projection onto this fireplace, and it was very on the spur of the moment that while I was trying to frame it, I saw my reflection on that wall, the shadow, sorry. And with that, I felt, let's create a scene to show what sort of a space this is. So me holding a glass and the other guy standing and having a conversation. So there are so many ideas that sort of spring up once you look at this image, that what sort of a space this could be. On the right, you can see the winter sun on the terrace of a house. Again, the same house that we had to shoot with the light going in. So the sun plays an important role, and how the wall is sort of helping the female sitting there to not be distracted by what is beyond the wall, which is a housing, which is probably a busy space. So she's sitting in her peace and enjoying the winter sun. This is again an image in New Delhi where the client wanted an extension on the roof, and they wanted like a green patch in the not so green setting of Sukhdev Vihar. So this image was intentionally shot like this to emphasize the fact how a green terrace with real plants and real plant shrubbery can change how we will look at our terraces. And rather than putting tin sheds and all that, it takes some effort to create green terraces. And this was obviously a comment and a discussion starter on how and why we should start to design our terraces. These two images are, again, the image on the right is from the same space I showed earlier, and the image on the left is a salon, basically, in Patiala. Both of these images again show dynamism and movement, and what sort of dynamism is displayed is with the speed of the people walking. And you can see how the image on the left, the girl is walking faster because it's a longer corridor. On the right, it's a it's just a reception right next to the door, so there's not much space, so she can't probably walk faster. That's how we capture dynamism in images and try to explain to the viewer that this real feel of the space through the right dynamic movements. Capturing some details and shadows always adds like an element of um, being in that space, because these are the sort of views that if I was sitting in the space, I would really be able to see. Sometimes these things go unnoticed, but this is again very intimate. These are intimate images, I call them, and just to focus on one or two things about the space. The next image, this one is one of my favorites again. It it tells you the story about this house pretty much, you know. The angle that is looking down and shows how the dog is relaxing. Again, this is a winter shot, and the light which is shining through the fan. The fan was turned on by me, even though it was cold, but um, the dog was not worried about it, and the sun was coming in deep inside the room, and this really started to tell this cozy sort of a feel about the house. This is a set. This is a short set for the people of this house where they, so that the grandparents were living with the kids, and she had this particular habit of, you know, scrolling through videos on her tab. So, and her space was the living room, the family room, and I thought it's best to place her there. In fact, call the grandfather also, while was a very common pose for them. And I asked their son and their daughter-in-law, and I was trying to ask where do they generally sit. So of course the project is shot for the architect who's designed the interiors, but the whole idea was to present the space for whom it is designed, to tell those numerous evenings where they would sit here in the same position and sort of enjoy their time, or maybe a cup of coffee or a tea or something like that in this space, with a nice view to their left. So and a nice view from the front, which is the window from where the sun is coming in. An angle which sort of starts to create mystery and a little bit of a haunted feel, but this image starts to tell you about the magnificence of a space, or how large or industrial sort of a look the architect is trying to create. The play of colored lights again starts to, and the distinguishing of so commonly objective of pink being the women's washroom and blue being the men's washroom in a cafe again at Ilante. So this was both to, the architect obviously wanted a shot like this to share how they have played with colors to define the washroom. So when somebody was approaching the washroom, they would clearly know which one to go to, and it not just try to read the sign, which was also huge enough for anybody to read, but just making things clear and just trying to make it catchy, I would say. But yeah. And this was the last image of a formal project that I've shown, and I want to take you to the image set, which is earlier, which is a journey, which is like a never-ending journey where I start to look at things happening in public, and I start getting intrigued by what an image would evoke. On the image on the left is something that I felt only a Swiss person could do: put a cow through the wall. And interestingly, in Switzerland, you've got lots of cows looking down on you while you walk on the streets. An image from a cave, Ajanta, Ellora caves in near Aurangabad. Again, I have a very interesting attachment to this, because these caves are all broken, and the way this girl is looking down shows the sort of intensity and her interest to look at a space and be able to explore something. This again is a capture that is just telling random stories about probably a couple, probably two friends who are sitting in a heritage space, which was very intriguing. It was raining like crazy. So, you know, capturing some real life stories happening in interesting spaces. This is a painter who was walking towards the main tomb of Safdarjung in Delhi. And the whole setting was so beautiful. And I was just trying to understand while she was walking away from me that what would she be thinking about Safdarjung tomb. I was being subjective about the fact that maybe she knows about it, maybe she doesn't know about it, maybe she just came here for her dihadi or the wage which she would get. There's a lot of questions that was happening inside my head, but of course the view was wonderful, so I thought I'd rather click it first and then think about it later. This is again from one of the caves at Ellora, and this is inside a cave and a window. So the outside you can see a rock and sun washing that rock with the light, but from inside all you see are these 16 squares or voids through which you can see the outside world. I thought this to be a very interesting view, and whoever is sitting inside had would be looking at this all throughout the day, nothing else. This I felt was again very interesting, just a typical street photograph of a space and a place which is very famous, Taj Mahal, but with a very different view of people actually lining up to enter inside the main campus, the tomb, and hardly anybody looking at the beautiful minar behind them. Because, when you've got something bigger to see, you often lose out on the smaller details. Marine Drive is a favorite example of thousands of stories happening every moment. And again, my visit to Mumbai would be incomplete without trying to capture how there is sufficient space between couples who want their privacy, but in a public place, trying to make merry with whatever they have, and people talking on the phone, walking, thousands of ideas being discussed, thousands of stories being told to each other at a place which overlooks the sea. Again, the image on the left is from Ladakh, people looking into a valley, but this image I thought was more interesting than actual view of the valley, because it starts to create mystery. And the image on the right just shows how drenched in the sun these people were in Jaipur, and trying to hold on, or maybe, I don't know, doing what. Oh, this is Inception, me capturing an image, somebody capturing of me capturing an image. So pretty much like Inception, an image that is not shot by me, but sort of starts to explain how the viewer will now become a third party to an image. And so this is making of an image, the image of making of an image. Same goes with the next thing is an image within an image. This is sometimes, I really like to explore these sort of narratives where you're telling more than one stories in a single frame, literally, and not with the underlying meaning, but literally on the face of it. Stories can be found everywhere for sure. While I was walking across the ghats of Banaras this early morning, I realized there was this guy who was peacefully sleeping while facing the river. And there were people who were playing behind, who were bathing. So hundreds and thousands of things were going on while he was probably also in his own multitude of stories, in his dreams. And to be able to capture something like this again happens very intuitively. Sometimes spaceships land in Delhi. And this is an image of the Indira Gandhi Indoor Stadium at the Commonwealth Games. Again, very old. These are older images now. And they just start to evoke the feelings of whether we were playing any sport or actually creating some sort of a UFO right there. This is again another image from Banaras, where the whole ghat is sort of stitched in a panorama. And Banaras, again, it's a city in itself where the space tells you hundreds and thousands of stories, but to be able to capture something like that was my pleasure. And then this is something which I find very intriguing all the time. I call this one for each day of the week. And I start wondering where the shiny white one would be used. Maybe a Sunday, not sure. And flying away from Delhi, let's reach Geneva. Again, frame within frames. So I, of course, knew the building while the other people in the group tour did not. They were being told that it is the WHO headquarters, and this was more intriguing. I thought anybody can click the headquarters, but it's rather interesting to capture people capturing the headquarters from the bus, through the window of the bus. So you start to delve deeper. And as happens in Europe, there are cute little girls sitting all over the public plaza. This is the Piazza San Marco in Venice. And after clicking this image, I was wondering, why is she looking that way while the action and all the birds and everything was happening in front? Then I realized her mother was smoking a cigarette on the side, and she was probably waiting. And not from here, but another image that tells a lot of stories about Paris. These burned cigarette butts all over the city, right next to the trees, the only place where there is some earth, like mud, but it's all covered with cigarette butts. So I don't know, it tells you something about the city or the people. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe I want to generalize something, but well, you know, my viewpoints are mine. People have different viewpoints and their own stories. And this image, while that image was about anonymity, I forgot to mention that this image was all about anonymity in a certain way, that people standing next to trees smoking and then walking away, while this guy here is trying to make a mark, the Arc de Triomphe. There is always somebody who's thinking about making a mark in the society. And this was, of course, when it was built, was for the honor. And against, so this is a completely different thought process against anonymity. This is about making the mark and standing tall so that you can be noticed. Flying back to a region in India called Ladakh, where a cozy kitchen becomes a living space for all the family members, and people enjoy each other's company in this space around the Bukhari that you can see in the center, which burns and becomes hot. It radiates heat all over the room, and people enjoy chilly winters sitting inside there, drinking their butter tea, which is lying right there in front in the thermos. While there is a haven for food inside, there is always a fight happening outside, and you know, survival of the fittest. And there's always somebody who's lying down somewhere, somebody who chooses mountains, who's enjoying the company of mountains. And you could also choose beaches. That's not a problem. Sometimes the cloud becomes the subject at a beach, which is not supposed to be. The beach was supposed to steal the glory, but the cloud here sort of, you know, it's his day. This is the last image that I'm sharing here, and all I want to say is that there are a lot of viewpoints and stories that go behind making images, capturing images, and viewing images. So everything that you read, hear, or even see, everything starts to influence design thinking in a way. And design thinking is all about keeping an eye out for details which would otherwise go unnoticed. For example, all the people here are looking at the beautiful golden roof behind, but there is one girl who's probably looking at me, who was taking this image. And, that is what I call a new and interesting story. And with this, I'd like to end my presentation. Back to Radhika. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for an informative presentation. It is interesting to see how an image can describe the experiential process of moving through built spaces and how the narratives go beyond physical traits of the structure, revealing the design thought behind it. I'm sure our viewers must have learned a lot from your presentation, and as a result, must be curious to know more. I myself included, and I'd like to take this opportunity to ask you a few questions. Sure. I understand architectural narratives require a lot of research to decide what all details need to be showcased in the picture. Is there a certain process you adopt to arrive at a certain decision? Can you share something about it?
Yeah. The most important discussion that happens is before the shoot with the architect, where see, what happens is, with a new architect, generally I start off with exhibiting my own way of documenting a detail or a space. With the architects who I've been already working with for over some time now, I know what sort of details they look at. But to begin with, there is always this discussion that what is important to be shown. There are lots of times where some details have taken a lot more effort, but they are not really displayable, right? Like sometimes a very tough situation to work out in a plan, in a setting which is very congested, you can't really show that in an image, but there are other things that you can always show that. So there's this call that is taken before the shoot with the architect. Generally, that is how we proceed.
Definitely. So here is my next question. Looking at the wide range of spaces that you have captured and the beautiful narratives that you have created, what, according to you, are some trending uses of glass emerging in the field, or like how does glass come into play for architectural photography? Can you tell us something about it?
Yeah, of course, of course. I think I've shared some images where the reflections in the glass change the whole narrative. If it wasn't for glass, the image where you can see the reflection of a tree in front of a reception, that image is a clear example of what a glass door has been able to do in the space. Similarly, when you're looking at spaces where windows are actually showing you something very interesting outside, which usually they are. So that sort of a glass has always been, I think it would be so boring to live in the era without glass, which was the era which I showed an image where the opening inside a cave was just little openings of brick and nothing else, right? Stone. So the view was very limited. I think with glass, you start to open opportunities in the visual realm like nothing else.
Definitely. Agreed, sir. So during the various stages of production, we realized that you must be using different tools and softwares which are required to bring these spaces to life. Can you share some tools for our audience or softwares that you use?
Of course. So the first and foremost thing is the professional camera that we use, our team uses, and after we have generated these images, we come back to the usual editing softwares like Lightroom and Photoshop, Adobe, and these are the softwares in which you can process the images properly. And I've been using these since, I don't know, 15-20 years now. It's been like a companion, constant companion.
Definitely. That's great, sir. So here's my last question. What are the steps you follow to set your frame? Like, which factors decide the perfect frame? Can you tell us something about what goes on before a shoot? Something like that.
Yeah, sure. So see, I always say it is very easy to click that shutter button. Okay, with mobiles in our hands, with digital cameras where you don't care about the space anymore, you click and you click, say, 10 images of a single space and you're not sure of which image is going to look best, right? And you never look at those images. I, on the contrary, have started to now, over these years, have really stopped clicking images. The whole idea is to actually set the frame, and the click can be done by anybody. Who cares who clicks, right? The frame is the most important thing for me today. And to set that, you need to actually start talking to the space and understand what it requires of you to capture. Sometimes places do start to communicate in a certain, obviously non-verbal, non-tangible way, but when they start to do that, that is where you find your piece in that space. And to set these things technically, you can move your tripod up and down, you can pan it here and there, these things are very small. That's why sometimes a novice who has no idea about either photography or spaces is able to capture a beautiful image, right?
Right.
It only happens when you start to delve deeper into where you are, and with the obvious intent of being able to capture something nice. Without that intent, nothing would happen, right? So at any space before the shoot, I think in my head that I have to become one with
That's
the
it.
space
Yeah.
and start talking with the space, communicate with the space, and that is where I will find my right shot. Yeah.
Definitely. So this is very interesting. Thank you so much, sir. Plus, I really hope we got to learn a lot, and we got to hear a lot of stories from you. So on
Thank you.
behalf of all of us at Glass Academy and Ethos, I would like to thank you for sharing your thoughts with us today. Thank you so much, sir.
Most welcome. Thank you so much for the opportunity. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.